Welcome back to BookCast FM, bringing books to life, one cast at a time. Today, we are undertaking a deep dive into a really profound and prescient book from 1973. E.F. Schumacher's Small is Beautiful, Economics as if People Mattered.
This book is just fascinating because it's not only an economic critique, it's really a philosophical manifesto. Schumacher essentially looked at the trajectory of modern industrial society, 50 years ago, and just declared it fundamentally unsustainable.
And his main target was what? The whole bigger is better philosophy.
Exactly. The dominant Western economic idea that assumes maximization and, endless growth on a finite planet is even possible.
That concept, endless growth, that really is the core of the problem he identifies.
Yeah.
He argues our whole economy is built on this massive, almost existential accounting error.
Precisely. He calls the modern economy absurd and suicidal. And it's because we have fundamentally confused income and capital.
Okay, break that down. Income versus capital.
Think of nature's bounty, fossil fuels, metals, clean air, our stable climate, all these things, they are capital. They're finite, irreplaceable assets that underpin all life and all industry.
And we treat them as
income. We just consume them as if the supply is constantly being replenished. I mean, if you run a business and you consistently live off your capital, what happens?
you go bankrupt.
Eventually.
Right. Schumacher argues that collectively, humanity is committing capital suicide by acting as if our physical environment is just this unlimited checking account.
And that distinction, living off the interest versus just liquidating the principal, that really explains the urgency in his message, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, if you look at things like climate change or resource depletion, those aren't production problems. They are the bills coming due for treating our capital as income.
Wow. And he says this all stems from a deeper philosophical stance. Absolutely. He observes that, and this is a great quote, modern man does not experience himself as a part of nature, but as an outside force destined to dominate and conquer it. We see ourselves as masters, not, participants. And that hubris dictates our entire economic structure.
Okay, so let's unpack those structures. He argues that the modern economic view of work itself is flawed. That's sort of where his radical redefinition begins.
Yeah, traditional industrial economics views work as primarily a disutility, a negative cost.
Something you just have to put up with.
Exactly. You endure this specialized, monotonous, sometimes soul-destroying labor just to earn money for consumption. It's a means to an end.
And that end is consumption, not fulfillment or community.
Correct. Which leads him directly to this concept of Buddhist economics. It just flips the priorities completely. The goal shifts from maximal production to human well-being and liberation.
What does that look like in practice, though? How does work achieve liberation?
He lays out a threefold goal for work. First, it should utilize and perfect your natural faculties. It has to allow for skill development, for craftsmanship.
Okay, so it's about personal growth.
Right. And second, it should overcome ego-centeredness by having people work on common tasks, fostering community. And only then, thirdly, does it produce necessary goods and services. Production is suddenly secondary to dignity and skill.
That is a fundamental challenge to the assembly line, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where specialization just strips away those first two goals. And this whole system is guided by principles we almost never hear about in a standard economics class.
Not at all. The central principles are nonviolence, ahimsa, minimizing harm to man and nature, and simplicity, the middle way.
Simplicity meaning what? Just consuming less.
It means aiming for optimal consumption based on genuine need, not maximal production based on, endless greed. If a society aims for simple, healthy living, the resources required are actually abundant and sustainable.
And here is where Schumacher gets truly provocative. He claims that modern economics isn't some neutral science. It actively cultivates human vices like greed and envy to drive itself.
Well, it's the engine of consumption, isn't it? If the system needs us to always want more than our neighbor, and it needs us to believe that happiness is found in the next purchase, then how can we possibly expect that system to produce peace or contentment? Schumacher argues that building prosperity on a foundation of moral failings is doubly chimerical.
So if the philosophy is flawed, the practical results must be pretty clear. Let's talk about what the model ignores. He calls it the problem of exclusions.
Right. Conventional economics, it wants to be this neat science, so it just draws a boundary around what it measures. It gets its clarity by excluding everything that's inconvenient.
Like what?
The natural world, human health, permanence, dignity, the important stuff. Clean air, fresh water, healthy soil, the goods that matter most. They have no price tag, so they don't appear on the balance sheet.
There's externalities, invisible costs.
Exactly. They only become visible when they need some expensive artificial replacement, like a huge air filtration system for a city or, costly healthcare for polluted communities. The cost is just offloaded.
He uses land and agriculture to really demonstrate this. We treat land as just another commodity to be maximized.
Land is the perfect example of capital that we have just fundamentally mismanaged. Chemical agriculture, sure, it maximizes short-term yield, but it violates that principle of nonviolence by forcing nature. It relies so heavily on unsustainable, oil-based inputs.
But I guess the immediate counterargument is, how do you feed a massive global population without industrializing agriculture and pushing for max yield?
And that is the core conflict he's addressing. He says the goal of farming has to be health and permanent stewardship, not just maximizing output today with methods that destroy the asset for tomorrow.
So in the long run, the efficiency argument falls apart.
It does, especially when you factor in the external costs of environmental degradation and the health crises caused by, forcing nature.
Okay, so moving from land to industrial resources, the consumption of fossil fuels is probably the most obvious example of living off our capital.
It is the defining feature of capital suicide.
Mm-hmm.
To achieve permanence, Schumacher says industry has to follow two laws. First, meet all your needs, as far as possible, using renewable resources.
And second,
reduce the consumption of non-renewables to an absolute minimum. That means demanding maximum efficiency, maximum durability, actively fighting planned obsolescence. Products should be built to last.
And the most dramatic and, frankly, worrying failure of technology when it's divorced from wisdom, that's his critique of nuclear energy.
Oh, absolutely. Nuclear power is the ultimate embodiment of complex, large-scale tech that completely fails the permanence test. It requires perfect human and institutional management, perfect security, perfect technical upkeep for, literally thousands of generations to manage that lethal radioactive waste.
And that is just an unacceptable ethical mortgage to place on the future.
Uh-huh.
Given human history, political instability, institutional failure, relying on perfection for 10,000 years is just folly.
He saw it as cleverness without wisdom. It shows the dangerous consequences of chasing a technical solution without first asking the ethical question. Can we responsibly manage this thing permanently?
So if big tech and centralization are the problem, we need a practical, human-scale solution. This brings us to the concept that is so central to his vision, intermediate technology, or IT.
Right. IT is designed to bridge this destructive dualism. In developing nations, you often see a huge gap between, say, extremely primitive, inefficient tools and then super modern, expensive, high-capital technology imported from the West.
And that imported tech is designed to save labor and use capital.
Which is the precise inverse of what developing countries actually need. They have abundant labor and scarce capital.
So IT has to bridge that gap. It provides tools that are better than the primitive ones, but are still appropriate for the local context. What defines this appropriate technology?
It has to be small, simple, cheap, and nonviolent. It must be suitable for small communities using local skills and local resources. The key metric here is the capital cost per workplace. So, while rich nations might spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to create one automated job, Schumacher championed the $100 workplace concept for impoverished rural areas, low capital investment designed to create mass employment and fast.
And this directly attacks the common development strategy of that era, which often created what he called the dual economy.
That's the fallacy of imitation. Poor countries were told to just copy the large-scale, urbanized, capital-intensive structures of rich countries. But this just resulted in a tiny, modern, privileged sector in the cities, while the vast, impoverished rural majority was completely neglected. He studied the unemployment crisis in India and concluded that concentrating growth in cities just failed to reach the majority of people who lived in, 2 million villages.
So the solution isn't to suck people into the cities to use the big technology.
No, the solution is radical decentralization. Development has to start where the people are, using tools they can afford, manage, and maintain. The goal must be fostering mass production by the masses, not highly automated mass production designed to eliminate labor and centralize wealth.
That makes perfect sense for local economies. But how do you implement smallness on a massive scale? We still need national infrastructure, large-scale coordination. How does he square that circle? The need for small, humane units with the complexity of modern society.
He addresses this with the doctrine of the mean. He basically argues that any successful organization needs two things: unity which is the bigness, the strategic direction, the overall purpose, and diversity, which is the smallness, operational freedom, human interaction, local innovation.
And if you focus on one without the other, you either get total chaos or a sterile, soul-crushing bureaucracy.
Exactly. So the practical answer is federalism. You organize large corporations or public services into these semi-autonomous, manageable, small units that operate within a larger unified structure. This lets the human scale unit thrive. It can benefit from central resources without losing its agility or feeling, alienated by some distant management.
Okay, so organization size determines efficiency, but ownership structure
Yeah.
that determines ethics and purpose. He has a really powerful critique of the modern corporation, the joint stock company.
Yes, the whole legal structure of the conventional company is built on a one mandate: maximize profit for anonymous, temporary shareholders. This legal obligation imposes a purely financial, short-term view on the enterprise. It forces it to ignore social purpose, employee dignity, and environmental permanence whenever those things conflict with shareholder return.
So the system itself legally prevents the adoption of his values. What's the alternative structure he proposes?
Trusteeship. He pointed to the Scott Bader Commonwealth in Britain as a working model. In this structure, the employees own the company not as individuals, but through a trust. And the management was bound by a legally defined limiting principle on profit distribution.
Wait, a limiting principle on profit? Why is that the crucial part?
Because it forces long-term thinking. If you legally restrict the maximum dividend or the rate of extraction, you compel management to prioritize reinvestment back into the company. They have to focus on employee fulfillment and long-term stability permanence over just short-term profit extraction. It integrates the economic goals with the non-economic human ones.
This entire deep dive, it's really been about a crisis of ideas. If the problem is fundamentally philosophical, then the root of all change has to be our education system.
It's the ultimate capital, isn't it? The cultivation of human knowledge and character. Schumacher argues that our current education system focuses way too heavily on specialized cleverness, on technical skill, at the expense of wisdom. Wisdom being ethical judgment, integrating knowledge, acquiring a coherent worldview.
So we create experts who are technically brilliant, but maybe ethically blind to the consequences of their specialized actions.
Precisely. If education fails to produce whole men, equipped with wisdom, capable of judging technology not just on efficiency, but on ethics and permanence, then it ultimately destroys the very capital a society needs to navigate these crises.
This has been a genuinely holistic critique. It spanned philosophy and work, technology and corporate structure. Schumacher's vision asks us to embrace the small, not as some romantic ideal, but as the only real path toward permanence.
His epilogue is a powerful synthesis of all this. He asserts that the crisis is one of thought, and our hope resides in changing those ideas. We have to actively support small, local, human-scale initiatives because the success of the whole relies on the health of its parts.
It demands individual responsibility, a shift in how we consume and what we do for a living. So if you're grappling with these ideas, we'll leave you with Schumacher's ultimate challenge.
The cultivation and expansion of needs is the antithesis of wisdom. It is also the antithesis of freedom and peace. So we encourage you to consider how you can apply the permanence test to your own career and consumption. Ask yourself, can this choice be sustained indefinitely without placing an unacceptable burden or an ethical mortgage on future generations?
That is a necessary thought for all of us to mull over.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Small is Beautiful. We highly encourage you to support the author and explore the full wisdom of E.F. Schumacher's work. You can find links to purchase the book in the description.
Thank you.
We'll catch you next time here on BookCast FM, bringing books to life one cast at a time.